Hi, this is Marina from Darkstar Astrology bringing you the fireworks, bringing you the Mercury Retrograde, which runs from November the 17th to December the 7th, all the sevens. So let's have a look at its journey. Now, it's going to be, I think this retrograde is going to be quite a truth-seeking one. Mainly because it runs through Sagittarius and Scorpio. And these are decans that are, as you will see when I start reading them out, that are very investigative, very much about researching, in-depth research. The only thing is that while Mercury's in Sagittarius, it is in its detriment because it's the sign opposite to Gemini. So I think this will bring out probably the worst side of Mercury as a trickster, because it's when he's a thief, it's when he's being kind of snidey and a bit sneaky. And because he's kind of weakened, he doesn't feel confident in himself. So he's going to sort of big himself up to get over his insecurities, really. When it goes into Scorpio, it'll fare better. It's not powerful in Scorpio either, but it's not in detriment like it is in Sagittarius. So let's have a look at what it's going to do. During its journey, it will be interesting, though, because it will do a really nice conjunction. When it's conjunct the sun, which is called CAZIMI, when it's basically in the throne of the sun, and it is actually quite powerful then, but only for a few hours either side of the exact time that it's conjunct the sun, because it has to be under 17 minutes of closeness. It's supposed to be very fortunate when it is exactly conjunct the sun and for that small amount of time. So I'll give you the times of that later on. But also, when it does that, it will also be conjunct Jupiter as well. Now, Jupiter's just entered Sagittarius by then as well. So it will, I think, give us a bit of a taste of how Jupiter in Sagittarius is going to work out. So I think that day won't be such a bad one. If you're going to pick a good day in Mercury retrograde, it would be then. So let's go through it then. Now, Mercury stations retrograde at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, which is Sagittarius decan 2. Now, what this decan has, in my research, what I found was that it's very much about curiosity. It's very curious, and its inquisitive trait can get it into trouble, but it does allow them to stray into very dark dungeons indeed. With Mercury in Sagittarius decan 2, the expression curiosity killed the cat is never more relevant. And the problem is the blurring of the intuition with intellect. So, many times we will feel at this time, if we have a strong connection to, if we have something in Sagittarius decan 2 or the other mutable signs around that time, that zone, then we should feel this part of the retrograde more potently. And with this, at this time, we could get a sense of knowing, but then difficulty proving our findings scientifically. And this unwillingness to divulge where our sources were for the inklings that we have will lead people to distrust us. But the most evolved people will have uncanny insights at this time into the Akashic records. And for those reasons, they should attract an audience for their kooky take on the world. Now, this placement is good for singers and artists, because then they can communicate in a poetic style anyway, and they're also able to explore their wildest theories and fantasies as well. But people working in more technical and left brain mercurial professions could find it quite tough at this time. And this is until November the 22nd, by the way. So from November the 17th to the 22nd. At this time you could have unexplainable gut feelings about certain business practices and leave a client in the lurch as well. Therefore, you could feel very uneasy and even become physically ill if you spend too much time in the corporate world, if you're one of these sensitive types. So that's the feeling really around Mercury Sagittarius too. Now, at the same time, we'll also have Mercury square Neptune at that time. So, well, this makes it kind of obvious that there's deception. The square is bad enough, but then Neptune as well, and then also Mercury being in its detriment. All these things put together means lies, means, I mean, when is the media not lying? But it will be supremely storytelling at this time. So watch out for that, and also watch out for people lying to you if you are someone who has planets, personal planets, or anything around mutable signs decan too as well, because you're going to get the square or the conjunction if it's in Sagittarius itself. And even the conjunction can work out as a hard aspect in this case, because Mercury's not working well, and he's feeling tetchy, shall we say. Now, from November the 23rd, then it moves into Sagittarius decan 1. Now, this is even more dodgy, shall we say, because Sagittarius decan 1 contains Antares. So Antares is one of the royal stars of Persia, and it's very fierce. It's the heart of the scorpion. So this is what I found in my research about Mercury decan 1. Political activists and sexual scandals are found among the natives who have this position. And it's mainly, because it brings out the trickiness of Mercury under the influence of these scorpionic stars that are found here. And it can become rather degenerate as well. Sometimes we'll be dealing with subjects that are taboo and also ugly crimes at this time. Now, also people can be demonized, and that's one of the traits that comes up again and again with this decan, because a lot of the constellation Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, is found in this decan. So it's the exiled, it's the people who are demonized and scapegoated as well. So, now one thing though is that makes this the exception for Mercury being in its detriment in Sagittarius. Mercury actually does rule this decan, so it does bring up the power of Mercury here. Not as potent as it would be in Gemini, obviously, but this decan kind of makes it a bit exceptional. Now, Austin Kopok, who also is into the decans and has done a great book about it, he says that Mercury here has infectious opinions, which really means that, things can go viral under this influence. I mean, this is the decan of the meme, and we will see in my research, I found that there was many eloquent speakers, but we should see some great speeches coming up at this time as well. But, be careful as well because of the snake oil sellers. It's very strong with this position too. And, as much as you can have great wisdom with this position as well, there can also be wonderful storytellers. It's still a tricky time. So it's much better with people who deal with philosophical and spiritual matters rather than the 3D business world as well. So it's not really a good time to be buying anything, because the criminal and perverse tendencies are liable to creep into the behavior of those who are less evolved at this time. Then on November the 23rd, Mercury is actually conjunct the star Antares. Now, if you don't know about the star Antares, I've got a post on Darkstar Astrology that's all about this, and you can read all about it. It's an interesting star. It's demonized sometimes, but it's still got a lot of potency, and it can be used, as always. You have the dark side and you have the good side. So it's one of the archangel stars, one of the royal stars of Persia. It's found in the heart of Scorpio, and it's a really lovely, if you could see it under telescope, you'll see that it's a flame red and emerald green binary star. But it makes it kind of look a little bit evil as well. Quite demonic colours, really, to be flashing between red and emerald green. Now, I found it to be a bit of a anti-hero. And some of the keywords for Antares are intense, fiery, compulsive, primal, survivors, trailblazers, combative, driven, maniacs, pushy, human, bestial, ravenous, rampant, wicked, devil's advocate, teasing, taunting, provoking, and Phoenix from the Flames as well. But these are movers and shakers too. And because it's a royal star, it will give worldly success. However, Antares' ambition can be quite ruthless as it finds it hard to modulate itself. And Bernadette Brady says that it also indicates that one can be the cause of their own undoing. The natural theme of this star is to generate success by going through a cleansing life and death experience. It can suggest one seeks intensity even when it's not required. And by its mythological symbolism, it indicates extremes, whether by choice or not. Now, the meaning of Mercury on Antares specifically is suspicious, wrongly accuses friends, unpopular, uses ecclesiastical influence in business. Now, that's interesting because, obviously this is using religion somehow. And that blurs religion and business together. Who could that be? Anyway, maybe Masonic as well. Money obtained slowly and with much difficulty. Danger of sickness to the native and his family. Death of a relative at home or away. Now, obviously those don't apply to everyone, but those are its kind of traits, really. And so, it could sometimes be literal. So that the exact Mercury on Antares is on November the 23rd, but it could be a couple of days before and a couple of days after as well, because Antares is a really big and powerful star. Now, this is the big magical moment though. November the 27th is the Sun conjunct Mercury at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. And the CAZIMI, when it's exact, will be at 1:16 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 9:16 a.m. GMT. So it's going to be between Yed Posterior, which is a star in the snake holder's hands, and the other star is Acrab in Scorpio. Yed Posterior, however, is known in older cultures as the man of death. And Richard Hinckley Allen says it's a star of evil influence. So there you go, another evil kind of thing. But this is going to be a little bit of a conflict here because on the same day, like I said, it's going to be conjunct Jupiter as well. So, I really should look up. I'm going to look up what Jupiter on... All right, okay, so there is actually a meaning for Jupiter on Acrab as well. And it says hypocritical, real or pretended religious zeal and legacies attended by legal difficulties. It's the legal side of Jupiter there. So preaching, a lot of preaching going on. And also, one thing that I will talk about in a separate video is the cult-like behavior of certain political parties. And so although there are people who aren't particularly religious, they seem to be replacing their religious zeal with political zeal instead, and it becomes like a cult. So, and I'm saying this from both sides as well, it's definitely both sides. So we've got the virtue signaling of the left, and then seeing Trump as some kind of savior figure on the right. It's on both sides. So, that's going to be heightened, I think, with this mega conjunction really. And yeah, so that's November the 27th. So I don't know. I haven't actually looked up when the midterms are. Are they going to be during Mercury retrograde? Let me just check. Oh no, I just looked it up. The 6th of November. So this is in a few days' time. I'm recording this on the 4th. So your midterms will have been done by the 27th. But I guess there's just going to be, I suppose it depends how they go. There's going to be reactions, isn't there? Because America's so polarized at the moment. So now, November the 28th, we get Mercury on Dishubba and Acrab. Again, the meaning for Dishubba, because Dishubba and Acrab are right next to each other, and they're in the Scorpio's forehead. Now listen to this. Mercury on Dishubba is hypocritical, evil mind, low associates, imprisonment, malignant disease, but chances of recovery. That's all right then. Criminal, secrets in connection with life or parentage. That's interesting. Domestic disharmony. So yeah, you could find out, some people might find out, oh my God, you're not my real dad, whatever, something like that. Acrab is dull mind, difficulty in expression or defect in speech. Gifts, how if difficulty in obtaining legacy but final success. So there's a lot of contradictions with Acrab. Now, generally these stars are, according to tradition, these stars are credited with giving the ability to do research. So this is pretty good for Mercury, and especially research into things that of a particularly secret and hidden nature. In lower types, though, a tendency to falsehood and treason can be noted. Eric Moore says of Dishubba, it's a fighter of great skill and characterizes Mars Saturn perfectly because it's a Mars Saturn star. Anyone with this star strong in their horoscope is likely to show a patient and wary approach to any situation. Scorpio is famous for the surgeons born in it, and this star shows up just the qualities which they need to have. The same applies to generals, policemen, private investigators, and secret service agents. So this is a time, it's good for them, for surgery, I guess. Because it's great for the focus. So they're both suited for detective work and make for in-depth researchers. I think it's also great for forensic scientists as well. So any investigations into those kind of areas, and also autopsies. I wonder if there might be some sort of autopsy in the news. As poisonings could be in the news as well anyway. So between December the 1st and the 7th, the last week of it, it moves into Scorpio Decan 3. Now, it could fall two ways here. It could either be a very good time for being a spy who works ethically to uncover the truth for the greater good of humanity, or it can be a high-class swindler. There could be some very dark criminals that come out at this time due to being, of course, Mercury, the thief and trickster, as I said earlier. Now, this is a time where people can chop and change wearing different masks as well. Generally, it would be very hard for us to see the real person behind the disguises because they're so gifted as actors. The mind is sharp, but you could have great difficulty in reading it. This could also be a fantastic time for people who are reading your mind too. If you're touched by this Mercury retrograde, you could find that you are feeling more psychic than usual as well. Now, this is a Mercury that can be very good at being the invisible man. Especially if you're at an office party at this time, Christmas party, watch for that person who's walking around and just listening and extracting information from all the drunks, basically, because that is typical of this kind of behavior for Mercury here in this decan. Austin Coburn calls this decan the Crow and talks about the tarot card associated with it as being debauchery. That's the one in the Crowley deck. Now, the card signifies drunkenness, fornication, wrath, violence and strife. Lovely. Now, this brings out the perverse side of Mercury as well. But at the same time, there's a great psychological depth here for us to delve into, really. So it's looking into the taboo and being quite interested in debaucherous people and how they work, finding out how they work at this time as well. Now, during this time, on December the 4th, Mercury will trine the North Node on Procyon, which is the announcer star. So again, it's all about announcing things. It might be the case that someone sort of comes out as well and reveals the truth about who they really are. And then, that's really it. Then December the 7th, it stations direct, and it's going to be on Ptolemy, which is in Centaurus, which is the wound on Chiron, because Centaurus is the Centaur, and this is actual Chiron in the sky as the constellation. Now, when Mercury is on this star, it's changeable, vacillating, fault-finding, difficult to please, but with a good intellect. Business success, though, strangely at this time, but trouble in domestic affairs through enemies, family sickness, disappointed ambitions. So that's what Mercury means on Ptolemy. But Bernadette Brady says it's dedicated to spreading information, one who's dedicated to the truth, who passionately pursues the answers, a time when people's emotions are stirred. So, it's a time for investigation, as always. And this one is particularly about looking into the dark and looking into the taboo, looking into the deep state. There'll be lots of references about that. And I know about this whole QAnon thing. Apparently, some people are saying it's a psyop. But from what he sort of brings up, because I've been following a few people on YouTube who follow QAnon, and this, they're letting out, like as usual, some of it's truth, little tidbits of truth in there. But then at the same time, there's a lot of misinformation as well. So, you have to just listen to your own gut feelings about things. And I think that's what we're being taught to do, because, Mercury, its lessons are learnt at Mercury retrogrades as well. So, what I'm going to do is go through what it means for each sign now, because Mercury is going to be in two signs. It's not only going to be in one. I thought it'll get too complicated, and I don't want to sort of go on for too long with this. So what I thought I'd do is just look at what that really amazing stellium, when we have the CAZIMI of Mercury, the Sun, and Jupiter at the same time, what that's going to mean for each sign. Yeah, that's on the 27th. So let's start with Aries. So that stellium for you is going to be in your 9th house. So it could be about learning a foreign language. There's never been a better time for that. But also, I think you should travel as well. I know every other astrologer on the planet is going to be saying, no, don't travel. But for you, it's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting because Jupiter's there as well. So if you want to get some kind of, I would say maybe, I don't know, if you've already traveled somewhere and you took the journey before the Mercury retrograde, and also, I'm not one of these people that say just don't travel at all. But I'm just going to say travel. You just have to be a bit clever and out-trick the trickster here. Just check that Mercury's not making a hard aspect to the ruler of your 3rd house, which is the house of local journeys, or the 9th house if you're going to go long distance. But otherwise, you're good to go. So I think for you, Aries, do something daring in terms of things with foreigners. Maybe go up to one who you don't know who you only know the language a little bit, and just practice it. Be daring and do something like that. So with Taurus, this is for you is the underworld. It's gonna steal Mercury's gonna steal Pluto's invisible helmet and go deep into that underworld at this time. And I think you will be sort of being your own psychologist, and you could have an epiphany moment with that trio there. The only thing about this is that you could just be a little bit too probing if you're investigating your loved one, so just be careful, respect boundaries as well, because you could go over the top because Jupiter knows no boundaries sometimes, and it can just be too extremist. It could make any partners or anyone who you're investigated feel that you really are like, being interrogated, basically. So, but you will feel extraordinary psychic at this time as well. So that would help in your investigations. That's Taurus. With Gemini, well, it's in your 7th house of marriage. So this is the time when you may hear that dreaded that sentence coming from your partner saying, we really need to talk. And, it doesn't mean that doesn't always mean that you're being fired for being the other half, but it does mean that you cannot avoid revealing what is behind your glazed eyes. Yes, even Scorpios. It'll be very obvious that you do have something on your mind, and it's just best to be honest. It's all good health, because then Mercury can be quite objective here, and you'll actually be pleasantly surprised that you're able to discuss matters quite coolly and dispassionately at this time, actually, because Mercury will be able to distance itself a little bit, and it should have some extra wisdom as well with Jupiter. So for Cancer, now the nervous energy is going to be really high for you, and you could be worrying too much because it is in your house of health. On this day, you could be very obsessive, and just be obsessed about like little details, nitpicking as well. So just try not to be too much of a hypochondriac. But the best way really to deal with that on that day really is to really study, really research. Instead of worrying in ignorance about whatever symptoms that you're having, just become an expert on it. And, your brain cells will really enjoy it at this time on that day. Now, for Leo, now it's in your 5th house. So Mercury is the arch trickster. It's at its most playful when it's in there. And you might actually have the urge to play pranks on people. But the problem is that it's very likely to backfire. So just don't do it. But do take advantage of the silliness that's pervading the air, because Jupiter likes to have a good laugh. So, go and see a comedy. That will be the best thing to do on that day. Rip-roaring fun, and laughter is infectious as well. So you could actually get the giggles over nothing at all on that day. So it's probably best not to take on board anything too serious, like giving a really serious speech, like at a funeral or anything. So don't do that. But it's a fun day. So make the most of it by doing something very, very light-hearted. Now for Virgo, you could actually feel quite hermit-like and withdraw from discussions with the outside world at this time. You're not really in the mood for heated debates on current affairs either. So instead, you're probably more likely to be looking into the distant past and really getting triggered by old memories that are coming back to haunt you. It's quite a nostalgic day as well. So really, it could be quite a good time to investigate, something like your family tree, or something to do with with your distant relatives. But you will feel quite nostalgic. So for Libra, it's the time for in-depth researching because it's in your third house. So you could really be getting your teeth into many topics and juicy subject matter. Studying for exams will be really good at this time. So just ignore pressure from others to come out and play, because you are better off just locking yourself in your room with a library. And, actually those writing a thesis at this time will find it actually hard to stop themselves digging and digging and digging for more and more information. But the thing is, you'll have to realize that you have to stop researching and actually start writing and putting it down onto paper. So that could be what you find difficult to do on that day, but it's a great researching day. Scorpio, this is a great day for selling, actually. If you're going to sell anything, pick that day because you'll have a natural feeling for it. Jupiter will be making you more daring, really, and pushy. It's not the perfect time to sign a contract, though, for a very large purchase like a car or a house, but you could do very well testing ideas out and dealing in actual retro items as well, so antiques. So really good time for picking up bargains. Go to an auction, go to secondhand, car boot sale as well. You could actually find something of value. So for Sagittarius, it's actually in your sign. So it's a really good day to getting your thoughts clear before you express yourself, though. Because what you say will be paid very close attention to. Each and every nuanced word will be amplified because there's Jupiter there as well. That's going to amp it up even more. So any tweets or letters over this time are really going to make their mark. So whatever you say is not going to be forgotten. So just make sure that those words are something that you want to stick to. It'll be as if you've written it on clay tablets and it will last just as long. So for Capricorn, you will feel quite hermit-like actually at this time, and especially on that day, you'll want to retreat from you communicating from the world. It might be because you fear that whatever you say may be misconstrued, because every word that tumbles out of your mouthpiece will cause chaos like a runaway train, and Jupiter's going to amplify that as well. Now, something could trigger you really big time as well. You'll be triggered by every piece of information you hear. So it would actually be sensible to ban yourself from any internet forums, because Mercury is clowning around in this zone of self-undoing. So self-censorship is probably the best move at this time. This mega conjunction for Aquarius is going to fall in your hopes and dreams sector, which will force you into facing whether those hopes are realistic or not. So this is a really good time to really focus and revise your goals. Are they too high or are they just not high enough? Have you had the time to sit down and envision some kind of dream future scenario? I think this is a really good moment to daydream and just see what comes into your mind on that day. And actually, pick the times as close to the CAZIMI moment as possible. And I've already mentioned those. I'll put them in the description below. It's for easy reference. And Pisces, last of all, for you, you might find that publicity for your business would be really good on that day, especially if it's an online presence. It's also good for a rebrand as well. But I think it would probably be best to wait till Mercury goes direct for you to unveil the actual rebrand. But think on this day, your mind will give you some really good ideas of what you could rebrand yourself with. And just rethink your presentation as well. There could be an incident that happens on that day that is actually some kind of miscommunication that makes you realize that you really do have to work on making yourself clearer or your image clearer, or maybe just the message that you give off on your site, your avatar, something like that. you might want to change. So yeah, that brings me to the end of this Mercury retrograde review. Do come to Darkstar Astrology for I've actually got a post that talks about Mercury retrograde in general, but it might help to give you more understanding of how it works, because I don't get that worried about Mercury retrograde, because I don't think we should let the planets dictate to us that much. And to get nervous about it, to think, oh my God, should I travel? I mean, I've heard of stories yes, there can be certain Mercury retrogrades where there is a bit of travel chaos. And I don't know if this is one of them. Because of the square to... There's no Mars involved with this one. And usually Mars and Uranus, if they were involved, there'd be sort of accidents, things like that. But this is more to do with misunderstandings, lying, things that are kind of blurry in meaning more than actual physical travel chaos. I don't think it's to do with that. So that brings me to the end. Have a magical Mercury retrograde, and don't let the trickster trick you, and keep your wits about you, and it should be fine. All right then, all the best. Bye-bye.